Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is Cathy Gabrielsen. She's a healer, spiritual teacher, Ayurvedic Health Coach, Vedic Meditation Teacher, graduate teacher of energy medicine, and #1 best-selling author of Dying to Live, Surviving Near Death. Cathy has a private healing practice providing transformational healing sessions online via Zoom, but she's taking time away from her busy schedule today to talk to us on Self Talk. Thank you so much for being here, Cathy.
So excited to be here. I'm so
No,
excited. Thank you so much for having me.
I know I am so excited to dive into today's discussion. I was just saying before we started recording, I have never had a guest who has had a near-death experience, or at least has talked about it on the show. So I'm excited for you to share as much as you feel comfortable sharing about that, and we'll go into um, what's happened to your life since then.
Mhm.
But if you could, why don't we take it from the beginning? What got you? Well, you can talk about your near-death experience, but also how it got you to where you are now.
Yeah, the near-death experiences at the time, I
Mhm.
didn't think that they were gifts
And
from
there were
spirit.
two. There were
And
two.
there were two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think they were. I thought I was penalized. Over time, I realized that, it was really, truly a gift uh, for me. So my first near-death experience happened when I was just 18 years old. I was a young high school gal with my boyfriend, senior year, all good times, until we got in a really horrific car accident and found ourselves in a really deep ravine. No drugs or alcohol or anything like that. People always think that immediately. It was just an accident. And we went off the road and fell into a ditch. And we were there for a little while. So no one saw us because we were down so low. And my boyfriend was dying next to me in the car. He stopped. From what I heard, they resuscitated him about 9 times that night. And he was airlifted and in a coma. He ended up surviving, but with the ability to just blink his eyes. Me, on the other hand, while he was dying, I was in pain, and it was the only thing was like me screaming, what happened. And then I just got this sense of a drawing, a pull, and I kept looking at the stars. I kept just seeing that light, and then it wasn't like a dark tunnel, but it was a pull to the other side. It just felt like I was going through something to something. It's hard to describe. It's more of a feeling. And then when I got there that time, the first time, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was. I just knew what felt like people were healing me. They were healing
Mhm.
me. So when I came back, I was so surprised I was bleeding still and in the hospital because I thought they had healed me. And there were beings there, light beings there, and they were kind of having a discussion and talking amongst themselves. And I remember thinking, like, wait a minute, I'm like, what are you guys? I'm here. What are you saying? And I got the idea that I needed to come back to heal my boyfriend actually, and also that it would be too hard for my father if I had stayed there. My grandfather had said that.
Mhm.
And so I came back and I never told a soul because I was that good little girl that didn't want anyone to think I was so full of myself that I had this opportunity to be with spiritual beings. And I buried it. I buried it. And then it wasn't until, I had lots of illnesses and over my life, young life, early adulthood and cancer. And then I found myself having sepsis when I was 40 years old. And I remember when I was in the hospital, I remember telling my mom, I said, Mom, I'm dying. And she said, No, 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 you're not. And I was like, oh no, yeah, I am. I'm sent like I could sense the pull, I could see the light. But this time it was so much more of an opening. It was so much more powerful. Probably because my spirit was more powerful at the time. Maybe I had suffered something about my spirit at the time. And I remember a week in the hospital, kind of, they call them out of body experiences. I remember kind of being above my body. And then I finally just decided to go into the light, which is so interesting because I had 2 kids and a husband. And at the moment when I was crossing through, I just had this sense that everybody would be okay. There was nothing to worry about. And that time was much more profound. It was I was able to see the layers. Some people call them spheres, planes, degrees of glory, whatever it is. But I remember going through each layer, seeing ancestors and seeing holy beings, and then seeing angels, and then hearing this air from angels. And then I just felt like I was home. And I was going to be there. And I remember when I saw the master healer, who is my source, because what I've come to learn about near-death experience is that everybody sees their own version of their God.
Mhm.
That I went right into his arms, and he was holding me, and his mother was standing behind him, and he was talking to me silently. And then he said to me, "I'm sorry, it's not your time. You have to return. You have to go back." And
Mhm.
when I came back that time, that I was anxious, depressed. I had PTSD that was debilitating me. I was such debilitating anxiety. I was drinking, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I just was like, what the heck? I didn't say what the heck, but I was like, what?
Yeah.
What is wrong with me that I can't get into the light, that I'm not staying there? Why do they not want me to stay there? And so
Wow.
I had to come back and really um, understand the messages that I received while I was there and what I really needed to do. And then the whole life lesson and the meaning came after doing some self work. So that was my second near death experience, was transformative in that it got me back into alignment.
Mm, that's incredible. That's an
Yeah.
incredible story. I mean, I could dive in anywhere, but how fascinating that the first experience when you're so young and confused and still trying to fit into a certain, as you said, good girl role. I can't talk about this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then also all the illnesses that you had after this, a lot of body battling, you know, almost
Yeah.
so that you could experience uh this second journey. Uh
Yeah.
when And it's fascinating too when you were talking about the layers. Did you how many were there? Or was it just all like they just came as they came?
It's interesting. In the moment, I wasn't counting the layers. I just remember going from one after the other. But now that I'm here doing the spiritual work and really working with spirit, they lead me to books to read, or and then when I read something that they tell me to read, I understand more of my experience, that there are degrees. Some say 7 or 8, some call them spheres, some call them planes, but
Mhm.
it was, the first near-death experience, I think, was like I've come to realize, suffering and trauma, there is the gift in it. We can't see it until we've survived it. But it was a spirit was trying to give me a gift, saying, "Hey, these are you have these spiritual gifts. You need to get in alignment with yourself." And I just wasn't. And it was the whole mind, body, spirit, because my body was sick because my spirit was sick. My mind was sick, and it wasn't really, and it was my emotions that really got the best of me over the majority of my life.
Yeah. And how fascinating too that when you came back the second time, there was that depression and PTSD. What do you think the PTSD was about? Was it about being sick and dying effectively, or was it about coming back?
Yeah, no, the PTSD, I believe, was the trauma of being sick and dying. Because then I came back and I was terribly terrified. I mean, I was terrified of getting sick. But then it was interesting because I didn't want to get sick, but then I knew I wasn't going to die, because when I had just came back and they said it wasn't my time. So I remember flying in airplanes and doing all these things and thinking, well, they told me I have work to do and I haven't done anything since I died. So, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, it was is the PTSD. The anxiety certainly came from the fear, the fear of, because I lived my life being a good girl. It didn't get me anywhere. It didn't get me into heaven, you know So I wasn't supposed to be the good girl. That's what it was. I was following some beliefs that really limited my soul.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you have any support at that time, the second time once you came back?
Yeah, the second time I did, my husband was amazing. You know, he probably was the greatest rock that I had. When you come, when I was who I was. I'm sure, like you, like this open-hearted, taking care of humanity as much as you can, that we forget ourselves. I left myself over here, and then I went off and lived what everybody else needed, because I'm sure majority of your listeners and yourself, I mean, we're so empathic. We give people what they need before they even ask, because we can sense it,
So
you
true.
know?
Yeah.
It is. And then, but because we're too busy feeling everybody else and not really staying in our own body. And I was really sick, and I was seeing a lot. I was medicated, nothing against it. I needed it. I needed it at the time. I needed to learn how to heal, and I couldn't have healed without the medication and the doctors that I saw. So people had a problem with me because I wasn't the same. I wasn't the same, which most people that come back from near death, they aren't. How can you be?
Yeah.
So I think people were struggling with the new version of me.
Mm. And that's so true whenever we experience anything profound, life-changing in that way. Sometimes people just don't get it. They want the other person that you were and not the person
Yeah.
that you are now. But you said
Yeah.
your husband was strong at that time.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I do believe that our source gives us what we need, and I needed him, and he
Mhm.
was there for me.
Beautiful. So
Yeah.
how did you move from the PTSD and the depression and and anxiety? What helped you to move past that to where you are now?
My kids, and my husband, but in all actuality, it was the reason that I had to move forward and pick myself up was because I knew I wasn't doing the work. I came back because I had to do it, and I wasn't. And I was on a quest to figure out, what am I supposed to do in this lifetime? Because whatever I'm doing is not getting me in heaven. And I thought all the service, I mean, I was of service to anyone that needed service, everything. And I just thought that was the right way, you know? And I just knew, I remember I started to contemplate suicide. I didn't ever thought about how I was going to do it, but I remember the word kept coming to my head, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to go back to heaven, and I'm not ready. And I had to figure out how to heal. And I came across energy medicine, and that was the very beginning. But it was I believe it was my intention that I wanted to get better, and I had to figure out what was wrong with me. And it was really the very beginning of, it was like I said, it was like a quest, a journey to find myself. I didn't know my favorite color. I didn't know my favorite food. I could tell
Mhm.
you everybody else's. I just didn't know my own. So it was really a quest to get back into my body, into my spirit, into my own self.
Yeah, yeah. And so is that what your book addresses? The Dying to Live? Yeah, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
Yeah, the book Dying to Live, it is a self-help memoir. And I really wanted to be able to help people. It talks a little bit about my experiences, and then talks about how you can heal, how I healed anxiety, depression, PTSD, and the beginning of an addiction that and that was another reason why I wanted to get back well. I didn't want to be, I knew I was on that cusp, of going dark or going light. And I really just had to make the decision to move to the light. And that's when the hard work began. That's when the hard work began, because I, had to figure out what was preventing my soul from rising. I had to
Mhm.
figure it out. And it was the emotions, and it was just the feelings that I had, all the negative feelings that I had, that I just accumulated. Mostly for a lot of us women out there who are listening, and men too, it's the shame of something, not, the shame of our sexuality or what we've done. It's the guilt of not giving away our last biscuit. I mean, it's the guilt and the shame that really, really, really hold us back. Really, really, really. And those two really powerful powers, disempower us. And I was not empowered. And then I was just searching for power everywhere outside myself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's often how we're raised as
Yeah,
well. Is like,
yeah,
especially as you mentioned, for women, it's like you are the nurturers and your
yeah,
needs come last, especially too as you become a parent,
yeah,
then and that's a natural response, of course. I'm a parent myself. There's nothing we wouldn't do for our kids.
yeah.
Um, so the question I have for you, I mean, that's a big shift. That's a big shift from, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm clearly not ready to die. Why am I here? Like, it's a question existential question we
Yeah,
all ask ourselves at some point, but you're really asking it like, hey, I know I'm not going there. I
I
can't,
gotta figure it
what am I
out.
doing? Yeah. So,
I
so,
know.
so what how did you start? How did you start to do that kind of healing coming from a place where you were so down and on the cusp of addiction, and which is a natural response to trauma, right? Is
Sure.
just trying to self-medicate and to alleviate the pressure. It's completely natural. So you recognize like this is not where I want to be. What did you do, or what was that step that you made to really change?
I really decided that I had to get better. I had this unbending intent to get better. And I started at the very beginning. I knew that the real issue maybe was an angel whispering in my ear. The real issue was that I had to get back in touch with myself, that I literally couldn't help anybody until I was able to help myself. I was that low. And it was really going back to the beginning. I study, I do chakra healing. I'm really in touch with the chakras. And in learning and reading, I don't know if I've heard of Deborah King, but she is my mentor, and I learned a lot from her. And really, I read her book on how to heal, and then it inspired me to heal. And it was really going through your personal energy field and going through your emotions. And so I literally went one by one through my body. I had to figure out, I was so anxious. I had to figure out what I was afraid of, because anxiety is just fear that's manifested in your body. And if you start to identify your fears and just, and so I remember I again, I think that there were little angels or guides just whispering in my ear to do stuff. And I sat down in my office one day and I just drew this little stick figure. I don't know. I drew a stick figure, and then at the how I have a stick figure has those little feet at the bottom and little like so
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
at the bottom of the stick figure, I knew that dark energy and emotions are buried low in my body, right? So I just wanted to figure out try to remember what I was afraid of at first in my life. The first fears I could remember.
Mhm.
Um, Being abused, being hurt, being spanked. I mean, what do people have? So fear, that fear. And then what's the next fear I had? And then the next fear. And it just brought me back to different moments in my life. Um, uh, that, I was afraid that my first grade teacher, I would use my eraser, or like just the littlest things. But like, I remember the things that I was really afraid of. And I had a wonderful childhood. I really, really did. But I was conditioned to be perfect because I thought I needed to be perfect. So when I looked at all these fears I had from the time I could first remember a fear until I was, thinking of suicide, when I looked at every fear, I realized that every one of them was about not being good enough, or really not feeling loved. And it was the act of doing that would make me feel good. And I realized that I was really moving through life doing things just to feel loved. And that was like, oh, wait a minute. I just don't want to let anybody down. Because if I let you down, then you might not like me. And so I didn't want to stop letting people down. Decided I was going to do everything, and I never stopped. And that was, I don't know, the second or third grade, I had enough conditioning to realize that, you know what? I want to feel good about myself. And if I feel good about myself, I'm going to do everything for everybody else. And I was like on a freight. I mean, I was driving the train. I was, And so I lived my life that way until I decided that I couldn't do it. And then I realized, people would call me and say, can you do this, that, and the other thing? And I remember I just said, not today,
Mm.
not today. I couldn't even say no.
Yeah.
I just, it was a process. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's such an important point. That you said so many wonderful things, but that first of all, and I want to reiterate this for listeners too who are going through like, how do I change? What do I know I need to change, I don't know how. It's that intention. It's the comparison between where you are now and do I want to stay here versus do I want to do anything I possibly can? Because for you, you were facing suicidal thoughts,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And probably you'd be kicked back down again anyway, right?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
know. I know.
not to share too much of this, but I have a friend, and I don't say this lightly, who he lives in India, and he said when he was young, he attempted suicide 12 times. 12 times. And at the final time, he realized, I'm not supposed to go.
Right.
And then he stayed. And then he said, basically, it took him 12 times to figure out what you did, which
Yeah.
is, I have work here. I have immense amounts of work that I need to do on this plane. So,
Yeah.
so the idea of awakening to that understanding and saying, no, now I'm being pushed. Like you literally had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And so now working and how beautiful that you began working with the mind, body, and spirit, because they all exist together.
Yeah.
And if we
Yeah.
try to do one and not the other, or two and not the third, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
The first thing I want to say is I want to put it out there. It wasn't like a magic thing. It wasn't one day I decided I was going to have this unbending intent to heal and then I healed. It was a process. I had to wake up every day and be in such gratitude that I was better than I was the day before. Every day is just a little, and then it just starts to snowball. It's like it feels really slow, and then you start to kind of get going. It's like you're like, you're going to win the prize. You're on the hunt, scavenger hunt, and you're collecting
Yes.
everything, and you're learning it. And it really it was a process. It
That's
was.
important. Thank you. That was the second point I wanted to raise, is that, yeah, this doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah,
And the process of being gentle with yourself as you go through this process and keeping your focus on, yeah, on those little steps that you're
yeah,
taking to get where
yeah.
you want to go. Gentle, 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 you know?
Literally, I started to treat myself as a child. I ate
Hmm.
what I wanted. I moved through life the way I wanted. I literally tried to act like I was a little girl again. Literally. I would have pictures of myself and look at myself and think of myself and forgive myself, for forgive myself for not loving myself for so
So
long.
important. That's so
You know?
important. Huge. I
Yeah.
hope everybody is writing this stuff down because this is important. That
Yeah.
whole reconnection and forgiveness and understanding that what happened to you as a child going back is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be re-traumatizing. It can be reawakening to that love and forgiveness, because that child is also sacred and had some stuff happen that needed to be healed. And who else can do that but you?
And even in the experience of going back and healing, um, I know, and that there are children that have that are suffering, and so at the same time, there was this feeling of you had a great life, why were you so, why do you feel so bad? You had a great life. And I had a great life. I did. But somewhere along the line, I got out of touch with myself, and my illnesses from the time I was after my car accident until my second near-death experience was a true indication of how that mind, body, and spirit is connected. My spirit wasn't fueling my body because it was all mucked up, and my mind wasn't digesting things correctly, and I was mentally and emotionally not well. So I was a bit of a wreck.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
sometimes that's what it takes. We have to be knocked down to our foundation to build back up again.
yeah, hmm
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Almost always,
Yeah,
actually.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your about the energy healing that you do, and what drew you to, let's say, working with chakras, energy centers.
Well, when I had cancer, I was just a really young mom. I had babies at the time. And I remember, I was just, I grew up in a very conservative religious family. Nothing holistic or alternative was ever something that we did or considered, but I never wanted to get cancer again. And I remember thinking, I'm going to do anything I can so I never get cancer again. And so I just so happened to stumble across an alternative medicine practice and started with acupuncture. And then I met this amazing woman who she was a chakra healer. I had no idea what it was, but I knew something transformative happened when I was with her. And then when I got really sick again after my second near death, when I had the sepsis and all the mental and emotional challenges, I couldn't find a chakra healer in my town. And so I decided that I would heal myself and I would just study the chakra system. And so I started it never believing that I would ever end up sitting right here talking about chakra healing and healing. And yeah, now I healed myself and then was just thought I needed to share it. It's just part of the process.
Yep, this is something that it's so interesting. This has been coming up for me for the last week or so. How interesting it is when we awaken, one of our first motivations is to help others awaken, right? The Bodhisattva path. How beautiful. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this, religion, spirituality, alternative medicine, how do they blend for you?
For me, I think uh, it's all part of me. It's a really good question. How spirituality, alternative medicine, and what was the third one you said there?
Religion. Yeah.
Religion. Yeah, it was. I honestly, I never had, I always believed that my religion, my beliefs, I'm really connected to the divine feminine and the version of Mother Mary. These people were always real to me. They were real. It was the other people that were telling me that I couldn't reach them, that, I know that I wasn't, they weren't accessible to me. I was kind of like, no, I mean, I knew from a young child that I was really connected to Jesus and Mary. I just knew it. So for me, my connection to the religion is not the dogma, it's the beings and the light filled beings. So from my religion that I was grateful to have learned, I took the good. I took the saints and I took the high vibe connections that I had and brought them into my spiritual practice.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it's for me, it's all connected. My what I've learned over my years and the connections that I've had to the guides that I have uh and healing, it's just, to me, it's all connected, it's all one, it's just part of the process.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I ask that question is because in this psychospiritual healing world, there is often a division between, well, if you're religious, that can be an obstacle to truly opening yourself spiritually. I disagree. I hear what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Uh,
it was always, yeah, it was a hard question to answer because I have no objection to it. To me, it's all, it's hard for me when people say that they don't believe it, that
yeah,
it's not, what I
it's
do
not
is,
about belief, it's about
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just where they are. And so that's okay if they don't understand what I
Oh,
do and they don't,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, it's okay
Yeah.
that maybe one day we'll meet on the same path, but at that moment,
Yeah. That's all where it is. And yeah,
yeah,
that's why I thought that was such a good thing to bring up, because many people think that there has to be a separation, and there really does not need to be a separation. Ken Wilber talks about in his book, Integral Spirituality, he says, pick a spiritual practice and just stick with it. Just do something. Just do something that connects you to the divine. What that looks like for you is completely irrelevant.
yeah.
But choose something that resonates with you, and how beautiful that it has so many different names, faces, appearances, presentations to each one of us. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah. So you work with clients, or do you, how does your day-to-day life, how does this show up for you in your day-to-day life now?
Now I spend a nice part of my day connecting with spirit and my guides and listening for the guidance I need to do that day for them and the information I have to share. And then I have clients that meet me by Zoom. And my goal is, we're conduits to help, and I love to help people get out of their way. I love to help people see. I love to help people get back in touch with their soul purpose and their alignment, and help them clear in ways that they just need support. They just need some support. And the further away we are from our soul self, the harder it is to get back. But we can get there. It's what we're yearning to do. I mean, people are here listening to you because they're yearning to ascend more. They're yearning to get to another level, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely. So what what would be a piece of advice that you could give to our listeners right now? Like they're done, once they're done listening to the podcast episode, what, and it could be an action or even a mindset shift. What could people do now to help themselves if they feel stuck in this moment?
Yeah, I think the one word that comes to my mind is just trust. I needed to trust the process, that it might be slow, it might be hard, it might not be easy, but every day I just had to trust that I had decided to making the decision to get on the path was the biggest step. It was the biggest step, making the decision. I'm not gonna move off this path. And then every day, trusting that where you were in that moment was where you were supposed to be. Trust that you're never alone. Trust the process. Trust the process. Trust the process. Trust you're never alone. Trust you have the power and the light within you to remove every speck of dark to fill yourself with more light. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
trust. Yeah, trust.
Excellent. That's a great word too. So how can people find you if they would like to learn more or work with you?
They can find me, CathyGabrielsen.com is my website. They can message me there, message me on Facebook, Cathy Gabrielsen Healing, or Instagram. But I love to help people. I
Beautiful.
just,
And I will have, actually, I'll have all these links in the show notes, your website, your book. You're even offering a free gift to our listeners.
yes, I'm
Yes,
offering them it's a healing chart, a healing stone chart.
beautiful.
They just put their email in, and on that chart, it gives some nice stones they can use, but also different ways to heal anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and manifest their own spiritual gifts.
Lovely. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. And Instagram, I've got your social media links here too, so we
Yeah.
can follow you there. Cathy Gabrielsen, thank you so much for being on Self Talk today.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. It was so fun. So fun. Thank you.